Yo, so old Fatlock here, ADA Lunchbox, he went totally fucking buck wild during his rebuttal of the defense's closing arguments. Now, yesterday when I was recording the video to wrap up and surmise the closing arguments of the day, the rebuttal was just going on, and if I would have waited any longer, the day would have been preposterously longer than it actually ended up being, so I'm glad I waited, so we can go back and talk about at least a couple of the nonsensical arguments that was brought up during this very angry, I don't know if he was just yelling at everybody who's ever made fun of him in his entire life and it just manifested as the jury for old Fatlock here, but it was weird and wild and angry and aggressive, and you could kind of tell that that was going to be the tone that he was going to take with this, because whenever he's pushed and poked and prodded, it's normally done with something that involves an electrical current and specific dogs trained in wrangling livestock to put them back in the stable. But Kraus went absolutely fucking wild and was making some nonsensical arguments, okay? And again, okay, the linchpin of their entire case is basically Joseph Rosenbaum. Now, if the jury finds that there was nothing inappropriate that Kyle Rittenhouse did, which the law and evidence should probably lead you in that direction, and neither of the prosecution's closing argument or the rebuttal would have really persuaded anybody who wasn't already dyed in the wall in their favor on it. If there was nothing wrong and that shooting was completely justified, the rest of it really falls apart because, okay, Joseph Rosenbaum, you remember, he also said he was going to kill Kyle on 2 separate times that night, okay, and was charging after him and was throwing something at him before running after him and grabbing at his gun, okay, which legally in Wisconsin and in most states of the union, you grab that firearm, and there are people that have been prosecuted in federal fucking court, okay, you grab for a firearm, you are legally armed. Okay, so let's not pretend that wasn't the case with Rosenbaum, but the prosecution would totally have you believe that, and because he was unarmed, Rosenbaum, this is, Kyle was being a coward because he didn't want to engage in pugilism with him. I don't get it. Why would you leave that as the last thing that you leave in the jury's mind? The last thing that they hear is Kyle Rittenhouse was a coward because he didn't want to fucking throw fists with everybody who was out there. And again, yeah, this was just simply addressing Rosenbaum, because if you take this kind of logic and you extrapolate it out with Huber, Greuskreutz, or even Jump Kickman, who, by the way, has been identified by one of the local talk station affiliates, it really doesn't much matter. It's just, okay, the long and short of it is, it was another person, okay, that engaged with Kyle Rittenhouse that night who had an extensive rap sheet. Color me fucking surprised, okay? It's information that the prosecution definitely fucking had. He just would have been, just like the Zeminskis, putting them on trial would have presented a whole host of more problems than there would have been solutions. So yeah, no, it was simply Jump Kickman and Yellow Pantsman. All of those people, yeah, we don't know who they are. No, there's nothing to see there. They all just have rap sheets way longer and way wider than, well, the Kraus. Damn it. Ruined my own joke, and I could have just went with longer and then his belt, but whatever. The prosecutor in Kyle Rittenhouse case accused the teenager of being too cowardly to use his own fists when an enraged rider and subsequent mob attacked him. Yeah, so by their logic, be as equally as unarmed, and then I guess maybe they just wanted to be prosecuting a riotous mob instead of bringing a whole host of charges against one kid. Okay, that's weird. During the rebuttal on Monday, shortly after Rittenhouse's defense offered the jury its closing arguments, Assistant District Attorney James Sauerkraus repeated lead prosecutor Thomas Binger's line that Rittenhouse unfairly brought a gun to a fist fight. What? Tell that to Gage Greuskreutz. Because at least Rittenhouse legally had that gun there that night. God, that really sucks for some people to try to reconcile. Didn't get charged with anything of it. Oh, but he shouldn't have been out there. There was a curfew. Didn't get charged with any curfew. That charge also got tossed out. Really does suck to be on that side. Clearly, if there is oh, okay, cool. If I was supposed to do this like Kraus, I'd be yelling at you with just rage, and maybe the rage just stems from the fact he hasn't feeded in the past 3 hours. So he was probably just absolutely famished. So he needed to get through this in order to have second dinner. But even outside of provocation, why do you immediately just start shooting? That's not even remotely what happened, but okay. As Mr. Banger said, he brought a gun to a fist fight and he was too cowardly to use his own fist to fight his way out. Okay, cool. So you're going to say, okay, shooting's bad, but what, like assault? Like theoretically, if you think that Kyle Rittenhouse is so much larger than Joseph Rosenbaum, who, if you recall, is what, 5'4" and 150 pounds, he's a stocky little fuck. And he also has a lot of time in prison because he is a convicted child rapist. Probably been in a few he's probably been in a fair few fist fights, if we're being completely honest. And Kyle Rittenhouse is many things, okay? He really knows how to pick a username on social media, that's for true. I don't think he's been in too many fist fights. So it's just baffling. It's baffling that the only fight that this guy gets into involves a golden corral really doesn't hold too much water with you. And really, take that argument, okay? And then put it to, I don't know, like a domestic abuse case where you have a enraged, drunken husband fucking laying the smackdown on his wife, okay? And she gets fed up and fucking shoots him one day. She was being too much of a coward and just shot that poor man. She should have just, I don't know, resorted to slaps and belittling terminology, mostly like what Mrs. Kraus probably does. But that wasn't even... That was preposterous in and of itself. And then he had this one as well. Prosecutor says Rittenhouse should have let mob attack him because everybody takes a beating sometimes. That's a direct quote. Yep. That just kind of adds on to the huge, he brought a gun to a fist fight. I don't think it was advertised as being a fist fight. It was advertised as being a riot. And Kyle and many other people that night took proper precautions to make sure that they didn't need to engage in a fist fight. So that was the rebuttal. It's about an hour long. I think it's been clipped out by a couple of different outlets that are out there. And if you just want a good laugh and you just want to see somebody publicly melt down in a courtroom for thousands, if not millions of people to see, do yourself a favor. It's high comedy, and it's better than anything that especially Hollywood has been putting out lately. But what has today held? Well, at the beginning of the day, and we'll get to it in a minute, but the backlash and the tension outside the courtroom, because today is the first day of jury deliberations, and I'll have to check and see before we're all said and done, but it really doesn't look like we're going to be getting any decision today, which... we could read it two ways, but once we get to the end here and closer and we have a little bit more information as to what the jury is thinking, we'll expound on it a little bit further. But it's that would normally not be very good for Kyle, because if they would have just came back after an hour and been like, yeah, no, we're good, we got the verdict in hand, it's like that would have been incredibly good, because they would have just seen it and it's like, well, everything's hinging on one specific piece of information. Did Kyle act in self-defense? If yes, completely acquit. But based on the information that we're getting from outside the courthouse, or rather from inside the courthouse from sources that are there, still looks like it's going to be all right, and maybe we're looking at a full and total acquittal, which is awesome. But the rhetoric, the misinformed rhetoric is running wild, brother. Democratic Representative Cori Bush from the great state of Missouri, by the way, if Kyle Rittenhouse acquitted, white supremacists can shoot at us. What? All the complaining witnesses, okay, they're white, okay? Kyle Rittenhouse is half Hispanic. I don't get it. What? This is another rehash of like Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman was a Hispanic man, but he was somehow being characterized by the media as a white supremacist. Oh, okay. Like Jump Kickman, apparently he's a black guy. We don't even know for sure or not. But it's... what? Oh my god. This case has nothing to do with race, but these hustlers, they're just gonna keep on making stupid fucking claims left, right, and center. No shit, though. It's Cori Bush. What did you expect? This is that fat thing that had that staged photo op on the steps of... Oh, yeah, it was the Capitol building, or no, the library. Somewhere she did just things as free internet access, and that's about it. But no, she was out there with that very well-lit and very well-attended by the media camp out for, I even forget what cause it is, but so does she. Because she didn't even stay the night there, I bet. But she believes that if 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse gets acquitted on the grounds of self-defense, white supremacists will be emboldened to shoot at Black Lives Matter protesters. Just the ones that attack them and present a clear and present danger to their bodily health. But okay, that might be just a little bit of an admittance. The Black Lives Matter protesters, even though that night was declared a riot, even before the shootings occurred, Black Lives Matter protesters aren't exactly that peaceful. More fiery than mostly peaceful, I guess. Repeating the lie that Michael Brown was murdered at the hands of a white police officer. Yeah, she's pretty dumb, so I totally understand that maybe she actually does know the facts on that, but she just understands that the narrative being intact is far more important. Cori Bush falsely claimed on Monday that white supremacists in Ferguson, Missouri would literally hide up in the hills and callously shoot at protesters. Oh, okay. Probably just jealous because we've seen a profile shot of her and she doesn't sneak up on anything. I don't need to see her run back anything about Ferguson. Would you like to talk about the property damage and the nights of riots there? Nah, but yeah, here's her tweet in question. When we marched in Ferguson, probably not for very long, again, for the same reasons, white supremacists would hide behind a hill near where Michael Brown Jr. was murdered and shoot at us. Any evidence for that, or are you just going to make blanket statements? All right. They never faced consequences. Did anybody press charges? Did anybody identify any of that? No? Okay. It was probably just the regular old shootings that happened. But, you know, if Kyle Rittenhouse gets acquitted, it tells them that even 7 years later that they can still get away with it. What? Okay. She's a very smart individual. But yeah, as for the jury instructions themselves, at the beginning of the day, okay, after, for whatever reason, Kyle Rittenhouse had to select his own jurors by having the bingo tumbler, the literal novelty tumbler. It was placed on the desk in front of him, and he was to select out pieces of paper to select his own fate. It's weird, to say the least, but I guess it's something that happens in a lot of cases out there, so whatever. The Rittenhouse jurors have now requested 11 copies of jury instructions from pages 7 to 36. After earlier in the morning, they were selecting pages 1 through 6. Pages 1 through 6 includes the first count, okay, the first-degree intentional homicide of Joseph Rosenbaum, as well as a self-defense statute as it applies to the litany of charges that are there. So that was interesting in and of itself, but then 36 pages in total is what are given to the jury as instructions. So to hear that 90 minutes into deliberations at the beginning of the day was at least an optimistic idea of where things were going, but then just to have the next 7 through 36 pages, okay, it's like, that's weird. You only ask for the first 6 pages and then immediately you ask for the remaining 30. All right, where the fuck are we going on this? But yeah, as you can see, that's the tumbler on the desk, and then there's Kyle just sitting there being like, this is weird. But the jury trial of Kyle Rittenhouse will start its deliberations at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Yes, they're still there, and as of right now, they're still deliberating, theoretically, or they've been released for the night by the time that you guys see this video. I'm not entirely sure. Punishable by up to 60 years in prison. I can't believe that, along with 2 counts of first-degree reckless endangering safety, or recklessly endangering safety while using a dangerous weapon, first-degree intentional homicide using a dangerous weapon, which carries a mandatory life sentence, and attempted first-degree intentional homicide while using a dangerous weapon. Some of those charges are lesser included, which, once again, all get kind of wiped away by self-defense. So this entire case, if there's not a full acquittal, there's going to be some really weird appeals going on for a multitude of reasons, most of which we've cataloged in these various videos, and other people have as well. On Thursday morning, Judge Bruce Schrader confirmed no members of the jury will be sequestered, at this particular point. That could be changing, especially with the ramped up rhetoric that's out there, if we can say that. Thanking the members as they left the courtroom to decide Rittenhouse's fate. Members of the jury, it is to you to determine whether the defendant is guilty or not on each of the offenses charged. You must make a finding to each count in the information, hence why they requested an additional 11 copies of the jury instructions. The foreman would have gotten 1 copy of the instructions, and then, it was requested that the other 11 receive the instructions as well. I don't know why that's not standard operating procedure to begin with, but I guess they have a Kinko's budget or some shit. On Monday, the judge dismissed the misdemeanor weapons possession charge, arguing that the statute was confusing. But they kind of figured it out, and after they realized that that's a standard unmodified AR-15 style rifle, ergo it's going to be a long-barreled rifle and hasn't been modified whatsoever to meet the short-barreled criteria. So as for actual court developments today, not a whole lot. Everybody was there. They selected the juries, and then the jurors just went into the deliberation room. They had lunch and came back out, and then they just went back into the facts as best as they understand it. So most of the information, or rather most of the news of the day, happened from outside the courtroom, and imagine that, just like clockwork. It's kind of weird, huh? The governor mobilizes the National Guard, and it looks like reports that National Guard are being stationed about 20 miles away from Kenosha. That's a little bit weird. And then protests start breaking out outside of the courthouse after they haven't for the entirety of the trial. I'm not saying that there's a few feds just kicking around in Kenosha to spark some stuff up, but seems awfully convenient. I wouldn't really put a whole bunch of stock in these, perhaps African variations on ADA Kraus, unless they're going to go loot a local Burger King. I don't really think, if you see reports out there that, there's protesters outside the courthouse and they're carrying signs. Okay, cool. There's a couple dozen of them. It happens. You should have expected as much. So then, once you get this report, there's a couple of different ways to read this. 2 jurors holding up decision. This is from about an hour ago. Outright citing backlash for U.S. Marshal in Kenosha. And the marshals have been there for a while, since the beginning of this case, because there have been death threats to the judge and anybody involved, really. And then, they're worried about the media leaking their names, what will happen to their families, jobs, etc., including doxing threats from anarchist groups. So 2 jurors and a bunch of other reporting from inside the courtroom as well. Note that there are a few Karens that were appearing to be in the jury box, and that was before the dismissals of the alternates as well. So perhaps they spent the first part of the day, it took 90 minutes, and there was only 1, maybe 2 rogue jurors that were in there. Most of the people were like, we're ready to go. We have our verdict in mind. Let's just fucking do this. And then there was 1, maybe they convinced 1 other person to really let their bias flag fly and then hold up the decision, So that right now tells me that there are 10 people that are in there that are just ready to fucking get this over and done with. And because it's so quickly, that kind of bodes well for Kyle, That's not just my opinion. That's kind of the popular legal take on this one, so I'll defer to them. They seem to be fairly correct if they said, especially with the Chauvin verdict, if they came back rather quickly, it was going to be full slate of charges, and we all know how that worked out. So again, you can go ahead and apply this logic out to the jurors in the same way that you could for the Chauvin situation. The cases are by no means similar, of course, you know the facts on this. But when it comes to figuring out which way a jury's gonna go, unless you have some just total dyed-in-the-wall ideologues, which could be the instance in this case. More often than not, these people that are just simply holding out, they'll eventually get ground down by the overwhelming majority. There's 10 of them, And also, as Robert Barnes, as I've been watching the coverage from Rekieta Law as usual, he was noting today that, yeah, this is kind of a pretty popular tactic in order for some people to just hurry up and weasel out after their arguments, just completely fall on the face of it. This could kind of be the case, especially when you had about like a half dozen masked jurors that were in there. It's not a court provision, okay? Nobody has to be wearing a mask at the time. It's totally 100% a personal decision. That just kind of leads you to believe a couple of different things are at play for these people anyways. So if a couple of them ended up getting on the jury after the selection, which as I am to understand it, it's 7 women and 5 men, okay? Don't know who the foreman is or anything like that, and then there's one Hispanic man that's on the jury. So Twitter's astroturf trend of jury so white, you can't really run with that anymore, but who knows, they'll try to manufacture something, especially if that acquittal decision shows up. So unless something happens overnight, because I just ran it back to check to see if there was anything that was developing, at least right now at the time of recording, and we're just about to wrap up, it looks like the judge is going in there to just see if they're going to be deliberating through the night or if they're just going to reconvene in the morning. But if we manage to get some sort of a decision tonight, this video will be going up first, and then we'll get something at the end of the day. But don't plan on that, okay? Mostly I'd imagine if I was to place money on it, it's definitely going to come before the end of the week. Could it come Wednesday? I'm thinking that's probably likely going to be the case, okay? Because, yeah, the decision was always going to be hotly contested, but thankfully, due to the timing of this, it is the 16th of November, so who knows? I don't really know if acquittal is going to be the outcome of this. Could it be a mistrial? That's normally a victory for the defense, but at the end of the day, it could very well end up being another opportunity for that corrupt district attorney's office to run back these charges. But we'll see, though. This is all the information we know right now. Yeah, that rebuttal, man. High comedy. Feel free to watch that if you will. I thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.